Brad, what have you done now?
Welcome to the Brad Gilmore Show on demand. We have a great guest for you. This is a guy who I've had the privilege of getting to know over the last several years. At least maybe several years, maybe just a year. But it seems like several years because we seem like old golfing buddies. He is the host of the upcoming podcast Collider Bodyslam, Best of the Rest. You can follow him on Twitter at ATTitanium. He is Aaron Turner. Aaron, how's it going, man?
Good, Brad, man. Good thing to know. If we were golf buddies, you would probably actually beat me because I'm terrible at golf. So
wait, here's the thing. I golf all the time. I love golf. I go out all the time. There's a golf course walking distance from my house. Having said all of that, I am horrendous at golf. I am no good. I'm a lefty, and everything goes to the left. I can't get the slice out of my game. No matter how hard I try, no matter what I do, sometimes I'll figure it out, but most of the time I don't. And most of the time, my partner in golf is Booker T and his brother Don. And they're both very good. You know, Booker's obviously an athlete, so he's very good. And his brother is not an athlete, much older than Booker, but still very good. So he's got like the old man golf game. And then Booker's got the athlete golf game. And I got the non-athletic, young guy, lefty, no good golf game.
See, I'm not good at golf the same way I'm not good at tennis. Because for my younger years, I played a lot of baseball. So when I go to hit a golf ball, golf is about precision. It's not about power. So when I go to hit a golf ball, I just hit it like it's a baseball and just knock it God knows where. And then same thing with tennis. Like when I would go to do like a forehand, I would just knock it out of the wherever we were at, like knock it out of the cage. So I have no patience of accuracy. I'm just a power move guy.
I see that. You probably would like. Have you ever heard of Top Golf? Do you know what that is?
Yeah, we got one. We actually have one around here. I haven't been to it yet, but it's brand new, I think. Yeah,
I think you would like Top Golf. It's no precision needed. It's just rear back and hit them and see if you can hit the back of the net.
I'm a beast on the driving range. I'll tell you that.
Well, there you go. There you go. That's my fault. My fault is I can hit it far. I just can't hit it straight.
Yeah, me too.
So, well, we relate there, Aaron Turner. Aaron, like I said, we've known each other for quite a little bit here, and I became aware of you through the Schmoedown Rundown podcast and the Schmoedown universe, the Collider universe, if you will. Let's walk through though the beginning because I don't know really much about you up until your hosting of the show. So let's start there. What was there any? Because now you've hosted Schmoedown Rundown, you've hosted Collider Bodyslam, you're in the podcast game, you're in the content game. Is this something that you've always been into, like, you know, podcasting or writing or anything like that, or was this a new thing and it was a way to get into the Schmoevillian community?
Well, it's kind of twofold. When I was younger, my good friend Zach, who got me into pro wrestling in the first place, we would play with our wrestling figures together when we were kids, but we would also commentate, like JR and King or whoever. And we would actually, he had like the Talk Boy. Remember the Talk Boy from Home Alone?
I do.
Like we had one of those and we would essentially record ourselves like we were doing a radio show. Like, hey, this is the wrestling radio show. And we would like do our own radio and then play it back and laugh about how silly we were. And that just kind of evolved. Like later on when I was in high school and playing football, me and my buddy, also named Aaron, our team was really good our senior year. So we'd be beating the crap out of people. And we were on the sidelines one day and there's this local sports show called like The Point After. It's all about high school football. And the guy on there is so bland when he was talking. It sounded like a golf announcer talking about football. Zero excitement in his voice. Yeah. Zero. So he and I are sitting on the sideline, and just to entertain ourselves and our teammates, we would just sit there like golf announcers and talk about what was going on the field. We'd just be like, and the running back takes the snap and down he goes down the sideline. And my coaches loved it, even though they told us to stop doing it. They loved it. Our teammates loved it. And that's just another part of it. My brother and I used to do the same kind of thing. We'd make jokes about radio. But as it kind of went on for the Schmoedown Rundown itself, if you don't know what the Schmoedown is, it's just like movie trivia mixed with pro wrestling, mixed with a little bit of UFC style. And if it's two things that I'm really into, it's wrestling. it's MMA, it's movies. It's like 3 of my favorite passions in life, and it was all in one. So I'm like, I like this game. And I got into it because when I moved to Florida, I lived about an hour and a half from where I worked. So every day I would have the long drive, and I got caught up on the Schmoedown movie show. And then they talked about Schmoedown. I was like, oh, these guys are really fun. So that's how I started there, listening to them on my long drives. And then they started doing the Schmoedown, and it just kind of grew from there. I don't know if you want me to get into the first time Christian Harloff and I had a conversation. It's pretty comical.
Okay, well, let's hear it. You know, Christian Harloff, of course, the creator of the Schmoedown, of Schmoedown movie show, kind of the head of content, it seems, or one of the creative minds at the Collider brand. So what was y'all's first conversation? What was your first interaction with Christian Harloff?
Well, so I'm sitting there, and I have this idea because I was listening to the Collider has its own after show called Afterthoughts now. It's been through many different names, but I was listening to them talk, and I thought for a second, I was like, you know what? The Schmoedown like needs its own thing. And like after shows are getting popular, AfterBuzz has a whole network, Talking Dead, Talking Smack, like all of that. It's popular stuff. People dig it. And I thought to myself, what can we do for the Schmoedown? Make it like a Sports Center kind of deal. So I sent Christian a tweet. He doesn't know me. He doesn't know me from anybody. And I said, hey man, what would you think about a show that was just devoted to like an after show directed about the movie Trivia Schmoedown itself? And he responded, sounds like a great idea. And then the next day I got a DM on Facebook from Christian, like, hey man, can I have your number? I said, oh, sure. So I gave him my phone number. He called me like 2 minutes later, and he was like, so you want to do this thing? It's like, do what thing? He's like, do like an after show. Yeah, sure, we can do that. And he's like, okay, cool, send it to me and I'll let you know what I think. So from like being a fan to now like semi working for this guy in like a day and a half. So it's just like, what happened? Like all of a sudden. So I'm giddy. I'm like, oh my God, Christian Harloff like not only called me, has my phone number, but wants me to like help him with something. This is great. So then I like reached out and tried to find people that wanted to do this too. Then that's how I met Frank Janish, the statistician, the man himself.
That jabroni.
Yeah. So Frank was like the first recruit, like the first person to drink the Kool-Aid was Frank. Yeah. And then we got Paul Wolf as well. But the first episode was just random people like from the community together. Like me, Frank, Matt Kearns, and Evan DeGraff were all together for that one episode. And then it just kind of broke off from there, and we were off to the races.
So you literally went from doing golf announcer impressions at the sideline of football games to falling in love with this movie show, and then movie trivia show. Then what you said you sent off an email to Christian or a Facebook message? How'd you get?
I sent him a tweet. I just sent him a tweet. That's all I did.
Wow. And then next thing you know,
shoot my shot, man. Shoot your shot.
That's one thing that I actually preach to a lot of people. Some people ask, how do you get involved in this? How'd you get involved in that? And it seems like it's a similar thing with you, to where you're not sitting around waiting for an opportunity. You're not even being presented different opportunities. You're creating opportunities. I always say, the old saying is when opportunity knocks, answer the door. My kind of philosophy is just create a damn door and then knock on it yourself. And that kind of seems to be what your modus of operandi was. Excuse the weird phrasing.
No, I mean, I completely understand that. I appreciate is that Latin? I appreciate that. It's just I saw a need. I wanted to take that need because I thought I could do something with it. I was like, I can edit audio pretty well. I could probably do this. And then, it's close to 100 episodes now, I was there for the first, I think, 58 episodes. So
over a year.
It was a long run for me initially. Yeah, for over a year. And it's grown leaps and bounds from episode 1 to episode, I think, like 97 now. So it's just kind of boom and boom and boom. And it's so different from where it started to where it is now. It's almost unrecognizable from then to now.
There's been a lot of shifts in the show, and we'll get into the kind of the Schmoedown rundown and your passing of the baton in a lot of ways. But you said, like, okay, you got this show. You don't really know what the show is. You grab Frank, and I love giving. There's nobody more on the planet I love giving crap more on air than Frank Janisch because he's so great about it. But in all honesty, Frank is probably one of the best co-hosts, if not the best co-host I've ever had. Super easy, real good at what he does, rolls with the punches, rolls with the jokes, knows what he's talking about. Always dependable. Frank Janisch has been one of the best people I've ever worked with. I'm assuming that your experiences were the same.
Yeah, and the same in real life too. On air, off air, he came down and actually stayed with me. We went to Star Wars Celebration for the weekend, and just the most chill guy. Nothing ever gets to Frank. I always said that he was the backbone of the show. So
he is. He absolutely is.
Anytime I was stressed or just like, oh my God, I don't know how we're going to pull this off, he's just like, we'll work it out. Who cares? Like, it's easy going, but he always does a great, when you say something like, who cares? Like you think, oh, well, he's going to do a lazy job. No way, man. The guy's always prepared to the T.
Oh, I mean, the amount of stats that he does. I hate numbers. I hate Excel spreadsheets. I hate all of that stuff. So I have to give him an umpteenth amount of credit for him to sit down and do that every single week for 2 matches a week. Sometimes when you have those spectaculars or you have the collisions and you got to do all those matches, 6, 8, 10 matches, however many there are, and to do it with the accuracy that he does, it's crazy. It's crazy, man. Like I said, I love Frank Janisch, but I also love giving him crap, and I'm going to kick his ass on this Back to the Future Rundown Schmoedown that we're going to have here soon. But let's talk about you're doing this podcast, and you said it'd be easy to edit audio. What are some of the biggest, in your opinion, parallels of podcasting? Or not parallels, perils of podcasting, I should say.
When you're on a deadline, when you're on a time crunch, that's the worst because I like to, when I'm editing audio, I can't edit video worth of crap. So don't even ask me to do that anytime. But audio-wise, I've got it down to kind of like my own science. I'm very meticulous about, okay, I could put this in here, this in here. I think a peril is being a perfectionist. If you're someone that wants it 100% perfect, it's really never going to be that way. You're always going to find some kind of spike in the audio, some kind of background interference, whether you want it there or not, that you can't really get rid of, some transition that's messed up. And what you have to do is you just got to roll with it, because if you or I are listening to a podcast and something happens, like someone drops something and it makes a thud, you think about it for a second and then you don't think about it anymore. Like you just move on with the show. So that's something I had to get used to. It's like if there was a guy every time that we started recording at like 11 o'clock, there was a guy at 11:15, almost on the nose every Friday on a motorcycle that would just zoom past my window. So it was always in the background. It always bothered me, but it's just something it's just one of those things you got to get past. But when you have a time crunch, when it's like, okay, we got to have it out at this point, and then that collides with that perfectionist mentality, that gets you stressed out. That gets you stressed out real quick. That's a long day.
Well, yeah, and I get that too. I think sometimes those little noises in the background or something screwing up, or you spill your coffee all over yourself or whatever it is, there's a motorcycle in the background. Sometimes I think that just adds character, to a podcast. I think sometimes you could even make a whole story on it. Like there's been a couple of times where we're doing the Schmoedown Rundown, or we're doing heated conversations and a guest cusses on the air, or someone drops something and then it doesn't go like you planned. You just kind of roll with it and you make it a part of the story. But as far as the perfectionist thing, where I kind of got my school of podcasting from, or school of broadcasting, if you will, was really from Howard Stern. Howard Stern never edited any interview, never edited any audio. And I don't know if you're a Howard Stern listener. This question always enters my mind whenever Baba Booey comes on the air from his office. He has this crappy sounding tin can microphone. And I'm thinking, this is the most popular and most dollar generating radio show of all time. They can get this guy a microphone. I just think that they don't want to. It's just, hey, man, it's not about being perfect. This is just, it is what it is, It is what it is, and that's why I've always loved that thing. But also, you want to put out a quality product. You want to put out something that sounds professional. You want to sound professional. If you screw a word up, if you screw someone's name up, if you say the wrong thing, you want to be able to take it out. So I see it definitely from both ways, but I'm sure going against a deadline and trying to edit audio, like, and edit out sounds and sips of water or breaths or breaks or whatever, just has to be mind-numbing.
Yeah, it's such a pain. And then now, with the podcast that I do now, it's all live to tape. So there's none of that, which in the beginning, it was proposed to me, hey, do live to tape. It's easier. And I said, I know it's easier, but I feel like our product will suffer. Probably not the case in retrospect, but at the time I didn't know any better. I was still young in the podcasting game. I was like, oh no, I got to make this perfect. Listen to this Game of Thrones sound drop I'm going to throw in there. It's going to be perfect. When in reality, yeah, that's fun, but it also took me 20 minutes to do and put it in there and make it just right. And it was kind of a waste of time in that effort, but just one of those things.
Well, and what's funny is I never knew the other side of it, right? I never knew. Not that I never knew, but I never thought to, oh, wait, with a podcast, I can actually sit and edit it and add little stuff into it. I came from live, right? I used to do live online radio, and I never had the option of an edit or a whatever. So if something screwed up or I sounded like an idiot, I just sounded like an idiot, and I rolled with it. So it is funny to, in the podcast game or the content creating game, it is funny to figure everything out, and try. I don't know, you trial and error so much, and trying to figure out what makes the best show or how to best produce a show. It's always fun to do. And like when I first started podcasting and doing all this stuff, I had this large, elaborate setup. I had all these cables, this big mixer, these, headphones, this wire ran into that so I could hear this and that and the other thing. And then now it's pretty much done through one piece of machinery and a small little microphone. It's just, it continues to get, my setup gets smaller and smaller and smaller. I put less and less effort into the production of the podcast. I just hit record, and I think that if it sounds okay and the content's there, people are going to stick to it. But the Schmoedown Rundown was an interesting show. It's funny, before we started recording this interview, you told me that you actually listened to Heated Conversations before you and I met. And I actually listened to Schmoedown Rundown before I was even a guest on it. I heard the voices of Aaron Turner, Frank Janish, and Brian Davids. And I was like, man, this is a good show. Because I fell into the Schmoedown, I'm sure sort of like you did. I'm a fan of movies. I wouldn't say I was like a movie fanatic at all, or a film buff, which is the term. I wouldn't say that. I was just a casual lover of movies. And then obviously a big wrestling fan. And I've always loved game shows. And there's like this complete like holy trinity of that with the Schmoedown. So I listened to a couple episodes of the Schmoedown Rundown. I was like, God, these guys are so knowledgeable. And sometimes when I watch, I don't know, Skip and Shannon or whatever, and you have these stats coming off your head and you know the stories and this and that, I'm like, God, these guys are so good. They know so much information. Was it just like pure fandom, or did you have to take extensive notes for the Schmoedown Rundown?
I used to take extensive notes. Very early on, I took notes. I would go, like, competitors that weren't going to be on the show before, I would go meticulously research them. I would look up their, like, LinkedIn's, like, where did they go to college? What did they study? It's just like, and then after a while, I was like, that's really not relevant to anything going on in this conversation. It's just a fun anecdote. It's like, Mark Andreyko, one of the competitors there, he went to Kent State. That's interesting. Their mascot's the Golden Flashes. That's an interesting tidbit. It means nothing. Yeah. But it's just that piece of information. That was my mentality early on, but as it went later, I kind of got into my groove as a host, if you'll say. And all I would try to do is just tee it up for everybody else. So I would just, all right, let me get a little bit of knowledge here, but these two guys, Brian and Frank, or Paul and Frank, or whoever was in there, I want to tee it up for them so you can have your conversation, what you like to talk about, the nuances. Frank can have his stats and his nuance, and we can all just kind of bat it back and forth. It's essentially like playing tennis, back and forth. Like, you send it to me, I'm going to give you a setup point, then you take it, and then just back and forth, back and forth. And once that happened, it was really smooth to do.
And it's always nice when you find a groove, right? And you know you're hitting a pocket. When I come from music, and when you've caught that pocket. And it's just, you're hitting it. and now you know where you can go to every time to kind of get your rhythm down, to get your to get in your bag, if you will, Aaron Turner, and it's always fun when you get to that point. So why though, when around let's say the 50s, when you got to the 50s in the episode, past the 1 year mark, what was the reasoning for your leaving? Because I did like a guest spot on the show. I remember reaching out on Twitter, be like, hey man, if you ever want a guest, holler at me. I'd love to come on the show. I do a guest spot. I think Frank was out for 1 week. I do a second one, and then I'm hearing that you're leaving the show.
It's all because of you.
That's what I think. That's what I'm saying. And that's the only reason if it's not because of me, I don't want to hear the reason. No. What was the reasoning for you wanting to leave the Schmoedown Rundown?
Well, it was a lot. It was a lot of fold, really, a lot of folds, if you will. But we would record on Friday nights. It was kind of hard to not, because the second Schmoedown of the week would drop on Fridays, and we wouldn't necessarily get them early. We did on occasion, but not always. So you would have to record on Friday night, and when you have different people, we had 3 different time zones. I'm in Eastern, Frank's in Central, and Brian was in Pacific time. So, for me, it was 11 o'clock. For Frank, it was 10. For Brian, it was 8. So it was hard to stay up till like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning on a consistent basis, even though my weekends were free, especially when you're young and you have a wife and you have to try to attend to these things, and maybe you want to try to have a baby, maybe you're trying to do these different things. And I just didn't, part of it was I didn't feel like I was devoting enough time to things that weren't the Schmoedown, because this is the thing that I think people forget when they're talking about podcasting, is they think you just get on a microphone and go. Well, that's not necessarily the case, especially with something like the Schmoedown. You have to watch 2 matches. You have to break it down round by round. You have to go in and get these nuances of, okay, what am I going to talk about? You essentially have to write a script for yourself. I would write like bullet points. I wouldn't write a full script, and you just have to make sure like you're on, and it's a full-time job, essentially. Plus you're stressing about, okay, I got to have a competitor on this week. What time fits their schedule? Does it fit with my schedule? Can we make it work? Okay, let me cancel this with this friend because I have to have this person on to make the show good. And it got to the point 1 week where a bunch of matches got combined together. So we had to, instead of doing the 2 recaps that we usually do, I think we had to do like 8 in 1 week. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, this is killing me. Like, I was up on my week, like my work. I work through the week at 7 a.m. every morning, and I was up on weeknights till like 1, 2 o'clock, getting up at 6. Like, that's ridiculous, especially a job you're not getting paid for. But it's just like one of those things where after a while it just kept wearing on me and wearing on me and wearing on me. And I was like, I got to do something else. I got to see what else is out there. And then I looked at going back into school, and I got accepted, and that was going to take me away from it anyway. Once I got accepted, that was it. Like, I was all done with the Rundown at that point. And it was a hard decision. It wasn't an easy one, because you have 2 people that are relying on you, and not to mention fans and Christian, the guy that gave you your opportunity. So you're kind of, in my sense, like, you're kind of like, is it a slap in the face that you no longer want to do this? Like, so you have to weigh that in there, and you have these people that work hard every week to present the show, and are you kind of slapping them in the face because you don't want to do it anymore? Like, you can't tough through it. So that was a lot of it too. And then I have my own issues I have depression that I fight on a daily basis, and that I was in treatment, and I'm working through that, day by day. And it just kind of came down. It was amalgamation of all those things, where in October, I told Frank and Brian one day, I was like, into the season, because Schmoedown goes in seasons. I was like, when the season's up, I'm done. Like, I just cannot do this anymore. Like, I'm going to stress myself out. I'm going to have a heart attack, and it's just not worth it to me to have a heart attack. I don't want to. And it ended up coming sooner than that, because I just got to the point where if I didn't stop doing it then and there, I wasn't going to stop, and I would have not, been able to relax. I would have just been a ball of anxiety the entire time. And I'm getting mad at my co-hosts. I'm yelling at them about stupid stuff that doesn't even matter. And it's just like, okay, check yourself. It's time to step away. And when you're the host, and you're kind of the showrunner, you can't just. I asked for hey man, can I have 2 weeks off? And like, let me retool. And then Christian and I end up having like a longer conversation. Like, well, what's going on? So then I kind of told him like my whole thing I just said about what was going on with me. And he's like, man, if you got to step away, like, don't think that we're going to be mad at you for stepping away. Don't think that at all. Like, you got to take care of yourself. And I think I needed that part of it. I needed that reassurance that it was going to be okay. Because who wants to be hated? Nobody. So I just kind of was like, all right, well, if he's okay with it and I can get, Frank and Brian on board and they're okay with it, I'll be okay with it. And I talked to Frank, and of course, Frank's like, no problem. Of course, it's not a big deal. Take care of yourself. Same thing with Brian. And, Christian came back and he was like, well, what about a replacement? What do you think? Like, who could replace you? And I was like, well, what about Brad Gilmore? He's like, Brad, he's like, you think he'd do it? I was like, I think he would do it. I was like, I don't know if you can get him, but I think he'd do it. He'd be the guy. So, and then the story really took off from there, I guess you could say.
Yeah, so I remember, first of all, actually, before we can continue with the story, I think that it was an incredibly self-aware move for you to do, and I am kind of envious of having that self-awareness. I think a lot of people, that's the biggest quality that's missing in most human beings is self-awareness, knowing when you've reached your limits, knowing when you've hit a point to where a thing that started out to be fun isn't fun anymore. And it's stressing you out, doing the exact opposite of its intended purpose. Your intended purpose is to entertain, and during the course of entertainment, you're now stressed out. Like you said, you're getting down, you're dealing with depression, which is a very serious thing, and I commend you, once again, for seeking treatment at that thing, because another thing that people don't do, they're not able to admit it, and especially openly discuss it, so I appreciate you actually doing that on the show. But being able to be self-aware and make that decision is 100% like super, super cool of you to be able to do, and I applaud you, and I think that you're a stronger person because of it. I'm an idiot. I don't know when to say no, but you
give me 7 podcasts.
Exactly, that's my point. I'm just an idiot. I just keep saying yes to everything. But yeah, I think that was just an incredible thing, and I remember getting a call from Christian and being like, "Hey, Aaron Turner wants to step away." And my first question was like, is everything all right? Like, I thought like you had pissed somebody off, and then you were out of there. And I'm like, that doesn't seem like Aaron, even though I didn't know you, I just, knew you from doing the show. It didn't seem like your tenor and tone and character. Then he's like, no, he just got some stuff he's got to deal with. We thought about you for replacing. And I was a little hesitant at first, just thinking like, I don't want to, it's hard when you walk in somebody else's house, right? And then you're saying, hey, it's mine now. And not really mine, but, when you're a host. And, it's almost like, in a lot of ways, it's, somebody has a child, and they're raising the child, and then they realize they can't take care of the child, and they put the child up for adoption, right? And then here comes a new daddy, in a way, and a lot of times that's not met with the warmest of receptions. So I was thinking, after I said yes, I was like, man, I hope that, I hope I'm able to do it. Okay, I had a good appearance or two, but that doesn't mean I can do it on a consistent basis. And two, I hope that I'm accepted and I'm not immediately looked at like, a replacement for Aaron, because it's not a replacement. It's just a retooling, I think, it's kind of like, if you think of your favorite, did you ever watch Entourage?
Oh, of course. Every episode. You
remember when they were doing the Johnny Bananas show? Like the Johnny Drama had his fictional cartoon series that he
with
did
Dice Clay.
With Dice Clay. And then Dice Clay walks away and they replace him with Jamie Kennedy, right? And the show immediately sucked because it wasn't Dice. It wasn't that initial chemistry. It wasn't that original spark, right? At least in storyline. And that's what I was afraid of. I never want to be Jamie Kennedy. And so I was worried about taking it over. And then we found our own groove, and I had early issues, doing the show. I don't think that's a secret to anybody out there. I had my own production issues with it, I guess. And then once those were resolved, we moved on. And I think now we've hit a cool stride. And you were, of course, on the first episode back when we did back in the new season. And we went straight to video. The first person I thought to call was like, well, we got to get Aaron on. And you kind of didn't want to do it, and then you did it, right?
Yeah. I was very hesitant to do it for a couple of reasons. Everything I do, I feel like is like tenfold, but the reason, or twofold, but the reason I didn't want to is because, well, these guys need to find their own, like, find your own groove, man. Like, I feel like the more that I show up, the more people are going to be like, well, why isn't he just on the show? If he's got all this time to be on the show, why isn't he just on the show? So I didn't want people to think that. And two, I had this conversation with Chris Clark, your producer, Chris Clark.
Shout out to Christopher Biscetti, Rosalio, Vicente Fox.
The best.
I can't remember his name, but anyway.
Best dude you could probably ever meet, that guy. He's amazing.
Yeah, awesome. Super awesome guy. Another guy who makes doing the show 40 billion times easier. Like, when I get to go and do the show now and it's with Frank and Chris, like, come on. It's like I'm not doing anything. But continue. Yeah,
it's the guy does magic. He really does. He doesn't get enough credit.
No, he doesn't.
So I was talking to him, and he's like, like, what's going on? And I said, Chris, it's like one of those things where I look at the rundown and I'm so happy of, that it's going and that it's still going and it's amazing and you guys are doing such a great job. But at the same time, I look at it and I see failure because I couldn't bring myself to overcome what was going on in my life. Like, I couldn't work it out. And to me, I look at the rundown at that time, I looked at it as a failure. And I said, every time I see an advertisement for the rundown, every time I see like a tweet, every time I see someone talking about it, I'm like, yeah, but I could have been doing that right now. And for a while I had to reconcile that. I mean, I'm totally fine with it now. It's just at the time I couldn't reconcile, like, it's fine. Like, it's not a failure. It's fine. It's obviously not. It's still going. But at the time I was just like, I felt it was a personal failure on my end that I couldn't keep it going. So that was part of my hesitation. But once we got going, like once you and I and Frank recorded, it was just like old times. So it wasn't no thing. All my stresses were gone at that point.
Yeah, no, and I was so happy that you came in and did the first episode of the new season. I thought it was only fitting. I'm debating on even bringing this up, but I don't think it's any secret to anybody out there because they could hear it on air. Getting along with one of the co-hosts, Brian Davids, wasn't the easiest thing for me. I had issues with it. And that was part of my early on issues with the show. Like, I was having issues with him because there was like completely different views of how to go about things, right? Just from a production standpoint, from a creative standpoint, and from everything else. Were there did any of that lead to your early exit, or was it all just what you explained before? Was there any issues with Brian? Like, I'm not trying to throw the guy under the bus, and don't get me wrong.
No,
I'm not trying to do that. But I know I did the show for 4 weeks, and I was like, man, I don't know if I can do this. Just because it was so polar opposite sides of how to do stuff.
Well, I think people probably forget this, and maybe they should because it wasn't a good show on my end, but Brian and I hosted the Collider After Show, which is now Afterthoughts and was After Schmo. We did that for like a month together, he and I. So it was our second podcast together. And when that show was over, he came over to ours. I always got along with Brian very well. Like, we always would have, before we did the rundown together, we had good conversations like on Twitter or whatever. We always had like a good back and forth. And he's a way bigger movie fan than I could ever hope to be. So we bonded over that. He's a big Chris Nolan fan, as am I. And we kind of bonded, Christian Bale. We bonded over these things. And I will, Brian is the kind of guy, like, Brad, you probably know this from working in the wrestling business. You have to. You have two people that are creative, like very creative people that want these certain things. Like, I want to do it this way. I want to do this. And they clash. And I think in the case of Brian and myself that we clashed a lot, but sometimes those clashes would be something really brilliant and really special. And sometimes it wasn't so great, and it would be a tough work environment as anybody would. I mean, I make no excuses. I yelled at Brian once and cussed him from one side of the room to the other. I did that. I'm not proud of that.
Right.
I'm really not. I'm not proud of it. Like, that was way out of character for me. And I was frustrated with everything that I was frustrated with, it could have been my own grandmother at that point would have got on my nerves. You know what I'm saying? And I love her dearly, and she never gets on my nerves. But I think it's just pieces of everything. And there's another piece that I didn't talk about was like, you have these competitors on your show, and they come on and they say, like, they vent things to you about the show, and it's like you find out some things that you don't know if, like, well, why are you saying this is weird? Like, I don't know why you're telling me this. Like I feel like people would blow off steam about other competitors or other people, and I'm just like, I don't care about this side of the game. Like, I don't want to hear about any of that. And then once you kind of hear it and it gets spread around and it keeps getting brought up, it's like, man, this is just negativity. Like, all this is negative. It didn't happen often, but when it would just be like, what in the, like, why are we even talking about this part of it? And it just kind of came to a head where we just kept clashing, and it's like I was the original producer, editor, show writer, runner, and then at some point, when it felt like my responsibilities are too much, Brian was made co-producer, and then we just couldn't seem to agree on certain things, and a lot of that is on me, because once that was on, like, once it was away from me, I was like, why are you taking this away from me? Like, I worked so hard to keep it. Why are you taking this away from me? And I think I resented him in that way, because it's like, why are you letting him be co-producer? Like, when it's my show, I don't understand. So instead of like working that out between, creatives and you people, the powers that be, I just kind of let it stew. And that's not the way to handle things. And I think I could have handled the situation between Brian and I better. I will always look back on our time with the Rundown with great fondness. Like, in reality, I think that Brian a lot of the times is misunderstood. Sometimes not so much. I think he's a very intelligent person. I think he's a smart guy. I think he knows a lot about the things that he talks about. And, sometimes people like that can be hard to work with. And I get it, but, I wish things could be different, but it's not that way now.
I think a lot of the things that you said, I echo the same sentiments. I think that he was one of the more knowledgeable guys, maybe the most knowledgeable guy when it came about the game, right? When it came to the Schmoedown, that guy knew so much stuff, and I could never hope to understand the game as well as he did. And our off-air chats, I guess prior to recording, our pre-recording chats, were always very nice, and we talked movies we talked for like an hour before we even hit record. And I found it to be nice, but it was just the, all like I said, we actually clashed on air sometimes, but I loved it. I thought it was great. Like, I thought it made for great podcasting, great radio, or whatever you want to call it. I thought it was awesome. So I enjoyed that aspect. I just think that, like you said, when you have two different visions of how to produce something and where you want something to lead, I am not a let's look at every intricate detail of a match kind of guy. I'm a big picture, broad, let's talk about it, let's get into stories. I want to keep it light. I want to have some fun. I want to laugh, crack jokes. Kind of that's my thing, and I'll delegate to Frank or whomever the guest is, or Chris or whomever else, to give me the meat. I'll add the frosting. That's kind of my style. Brian's obviously was very different. It was, let's go question by question. Let's talk about it all. So I think that there's just the ideologies clashed. And that's why I was just like, man, I don't know. And I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but that was just my beef. And, we moved past it. But that's not even the thing. I just wanted to discuss it because I'm sure people have been waiting to hear the stories behind the Rundown. Because it has been quite the rotating door of hosts, would you not say? It's like it's so weird. Aaron, Paul, Brian, Brad, Frank, Chris, Yeah,
here or there. And what's weird is like that one time, like I missed the show one time to go to WrestleMania. It's the only time I ever missed it, like I think during that entire run. Maybe another time for another vacation, but just to think of how long that run was, it's just like I look back on it, I'm like, how did I even do that? Like, I don't know how I even did that. Miss Movies filled in for me. She's fantastic. But
the best. Shout out to Brian.
And Brian is what, like, the thing people don't know about Brian is like he hosted, I think, like 80 episodes of between those two shows in a row. Never missed a day. Always on, like, always did his thing. So I commend him for that. I know people like want some kind of salacious kind of nonsense, but I'm not going to give it to you because I don't have anything. Like I told you, I cussed him out. Like that's pretty much the worst thing that ever happened between us. Is I cussed him out. I felt really bad about it, and we moved on. So that's about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, you know what? One of the things though you brought up earlier is you talked to Christian whenever you were kind of asking for time off. You went to the head honcho, Mr. Christian Harloff. Talk to me about Christian, because every interaction, and sometimes people, in comment sections or whatever, rag on him, for different reasons regarding more of the Schmoedown than anything, and it's all silliness. But every time I've ever talked to Christian, we've had hour to hour and a half to 2 hour long phone calls and talks. I think that he's one of the most giving people as far as opportunities and as far as advice I think I've come across in my career in media. He's not a guy who will just tell you something to tell you. I think he keeps it super 100, honest all the time. And I find him to be just a great all-around individual. What is your assessment of Senor Darth Harloff?
Darth Harloff, indeed. It's weird coming at it from the perspective that I have it now, because as a fan, you look at Christian as like the almighty creator. Like, it's like, oh my God, like he created this empire, him and Mark Ellis, and it's like, now I know him. Now he has my phone number. I have his phone number. I can just call him whatever I want. Right. I mean, he won't answer, but I'll call him whatever, especially on Sunday.
I'm not talking to him.
Especially on Sundays, he doesn't answer. But our relationship for a while was kind of complicated in the Rundown era. It was, at times, it was a little tumultuous. I think sometimes he thought I was being a little bratty, and I think sometimes I thought he was being a little bratty. So we kind of had that back and forth. But once again, that's a creative thing. He's the director of like creative development or something. I like to liken myself as a creative person, so we clash. That happens, but it was never anything where I felt like he didn't have the best interest of the show or the best interest in myself. Like, he always, like when we had like really bad hurricanes a couple of years ago here in Florida, and our county was getting evacuated. Like, leave the county. It's going to be really bad. And I did the rundown that week, and I remember him calling me on the phone. He was like, are you doing the show this week? And I said, yeah. He's like, isn't there a hurricane going on? Because his family lives in Florida, some of his family. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, well, like, aren't you going to leave the state? And I said, no, I don't feel like I need to. And he's like, so you mean to tell me that you're going to sit there in a hurricane and do the show? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, okay, wow. And then, like, we had this conversation. Like, he's like, do you want to talk about the rundown? I was like, well, not really, because I'm in the middle of a hurricane, but what do you got? And then we ended up having this conversation about the show during the hurricane, which at the time I was like, why is he talking to me during the hurricane about a show? I don't understand it. Like, I was kind of like, even at the time, I was like, why is he doing this? But then I grew to realize that he just wanted to keep my mind off of it, so I wasn't stressed out about the hurricane. Like, he cared enough to call me and like make sure we were doing okay. Like, the guy barely knows me. I've met him one time in my life in person. So it's kind of like, that's huge. And then when I did meet Christian for the first time in person at Star Wars Celebration, it was like we were old friends. Like, hey, how you doing? Good to see you in person. And then we had this long conversation about the show and how like proud he was of me and Frank, and like what he wanted to do. And he talked to me like one of his own. Like, we were there with Copster, and he was talking to both of us like we were coworkers. He's like, okay, well, what do you think about this? Go talk to this person. Let's bring this person over here. What do you think about this? He's always been someone that's bounced ideas off of me, and I like try to bounce them back. And, I text him. He's had some personal things going on with, some unfortunate loss in his family on his side of things. And I text him and, tell him that we're thinking about him, and he's always appreciative of those. So we kind of have that relationship now where I feel comfortable going to him with anything. And I'll still rib him on occasion because he doesn't like Bray Wyatt for some reason. So, but I do.
Well,
so
I don't blame him too much on that one, but continue.
I'll always rib him about Bray Wyatt and how like Bray Wyatt's over, you just can't see it and things like that. But he's always been a guy that's for whatever reason, if I never saw it in myself, he saw it. So I can't really say enough about how grateful I to him for giving me these opportunities, not just one opportunity and you're gone, several opportunities, and never really kicking me completely out. And I always thank him for that. I hope he knows that. I think he does, but I hope he knows that I am always grateful, no matter if I'm being a little bratty or we have an argument. Like it's kind of like a brotherly argument. We're not that close, but it's like kind of like, your basketball buddies, like you have an argument about something, then it's fine later. So, we have a good relationship.
And I think that, that's like a normal thing in a creative atmosphere. I always liken to creative arguments with my creative cohorts, if you will, to playing on a basketball team. Sometimes if your buddy misses that open three, you might go to the bench and cuss his ass out, and yell at him, be like, come on. Look, LeBron punched a whiteboard because of J.R. Smith. I'm sure he doesn't hate J.R. Smith. He was just upset at his friend for making a dumb play on a basketball court, or a decision he wouldn't have made, or doing something that he wouldn't advise you do. And I think that that's the same thing. I think that's a natural thing to clash. I've clashed in creative meetings with Booker T and with Kevin Bernhardt, the director, or Bruce Pritchard, or whomever else. That's something that happens. And if it doesn't happen, that just means that, one of you is a yes man. Essentially. So, I'm always super appreciative of everything Christian has done. And you hate to see somebody go through hard times, but somebody like Christian, who's been killing it on Collider Live, by the way, absolutely. That show's been so awesome early in its run. But let's talk about, you said opportunities, as you said. Let's talk about the second opportunity, or one of the opportunities that you got. I heard that Collider was going to do a pro wrestling podcast. And I was like, oh, wow, that's a great idea. And I was like, who's hosting it? And he was like, John Roca and Aaron Turner. Even better idea, even though a man who earlier said he didn't want to do the first episode of the new season of the Rundown because people have said, well, if he's got all this time, why isn't he on the show? And then you come out with another show, Aaron Turner.
I know. That's the Frank Janish thing. That's what he told me.
That's the Frank Janish thing. Yeah.
I went to, well, here's the thing. The first person I talked to about it when I found out about Collider Bodyslam, as it's called, is I went to Frank Janish. And I said, Frank, there's this opportunity for me to do a show. I don't know how long it's going to last, but it's a wrestling podcast. Is it okay with you? Is it cool if I do it? Because I didn't want to be that person that's like, well, now you have all this time. Why are you leaving me high and dry? And in true Janish fashion, he was like, well, yeah, it makes sense. Why wouldn't you do it? So that's just the reassurance I needed, because Frank has always been a guy, like I said, he's the backbone. So Frank's always been a good friend to me. Met the guy once, and I considered him a great friend, like truly. And I needed that. I needed that reassurance. And once he gave it to me, I was only there to do one episode. Like, I just want to make that very clear.
Oh, like, really? It was just supposed to be a one-off?
Yeah, it was, to my knowledge, it was just a one-off. It was like, I started getting the itch, man. Like around WrestleMania time, I was getting the itch. I was like, man, I want to do like a wrestling podcast, but it takes so long to get it. If you're going to do it yourself and you don't have any kind of like backing or network, like it takes you so long to get podcasts off the ground and get viewership or listenership. And I was like, man, I don't know if I got to get in with somebody that knows. Let me see what Christian thinks. Cause we've been batting the idea of a wrestling podcast around for a long time, long time. And originally, here's you some inside baseball. I don't know if I can say this, but I will. There was Collider used to have a partnership with Go90, Verizon Go90.
Right.
And there was, they had the Awesome-tacular show. It might still be on there. I'm not sure. But they were going to do a wrestling show. And it was going to be Christian and Ken Knapsack and Jay Washington, I think, and Jen Sturger, or Jen Decker now. We're going to do like a video show, a video wrestling show. For whatever reason, that didn't end up panning out. I don't remember why. But and then that was going to morph into what Collider Bodyslam was going to be. So I was like, okay, so I'll come on occasion. You guys like need somebody, I'll just jump in on a podcast. No big deal. I've guested before. It's easy to do. And me, Christian, and John Roca did the WrestleMania 34 recap, whatever this past WrestleMania was. And it went really well. Like, people really responded to it out of nowhere. It's just like, oh, yeah, wrestling podcast. Please do this all the time. And, like, I was talking to Christian after we stopped recording. I was like, thanks, man. This was a really good time. I appreciate it. If you guys if you guys ever need somebody to, jump in and help every once in a while, just let me know and I'll see what I can do. And he's like, well, we'll need you next week and the week after that, the week after. I was like, oh, so this is a thing. And he's like, well, yeah. What do you think I brought you back for? I was like, okay. So wait. So I was like, so wait a second. So me, a guy that hosted the Schmoedown Rundown, like nobody in this Collider space, essentially nobody. And I'm going with the top guy. Like John Roca's like the top guy there. Mm-hmm. And it's like doing a podcast with like Stone Cold. It's like just out of nowhere. It's like me and Stone Cold doing a podcast together. So it's like, why wouldn't I? And it's one of the things, Brad, I got to tell you, man, like I'm a Titanic wrestling fan since I was 6 years old, not gigantic, Titanic. And to be able to talk about wrestling on like a weekly basis with people that love it is something that I've always wanted to do. Like that is I never wanted to be an actual wrestler. Never. I always wanted to be a part of the business though. And if this is my little part, my little contribution to the business, I will take it. And when that opportunity was given, there's no better way I could do it or nothing I could think of more than doing that.
No, and I think that it's awesome that you jumped at the opportunity and now you're talking about this thing that you love, just similar to the Schmoedown. I mean, you created the opportunity of a show to talk about something that you love, the Schmoedown. Now, you bring up wrestling, you bring up Bodyslam. So Collider buys Pro Wrestling Sheet, which is run by Ryan Satin. And then Ryan Satin kind of, not sort of, but actually, yeah, it kind of takes your role on Collider Bodyslam.
He Eric Bischoffed me.
He Bischoffed you, brother. He really did. He Bischoffed you. And now, though, you're going to be the host of something a little bit different. Still talking pro wrestling on a weekly basis. Going to be Collider Bodyslam Best of the Rest. I know it's still kind of in pre-production before you do a full rollout, but what's the concept behind Collider Bodyslam Best of the Rest?
So Collider Bodyslam, as you stated, started out as like just a weekly recap show of Raw, SmackDown. It was like an hour show to try to fit in like 7 things, and it just wasn't working because we have to run through everything. It's like, well, let's talk about NXT. If there was something you really wanted to talk about, you only had like 10 seconds to talk about it because we had to keep moving forward. Because you get like an hour and 15 minutes of studio time. A lot of people need that studio, so we're just running through. And then when Ryan came on and bought it, or not bought it, but when Collider bought Pro Wrestling Sheet, we had this long conversation about what about we'll break it up, Raw, SmackDown on Tuesday and Wednesday, and he has guys that do a show called Top 5. They have the flagship Pro Wrestling Sheet show, and he's like, I don't want you to think I'm kicking you out because I'm not. I want you to do your own thing, like do your own show. He's like, what we need is somebody that is knowledgeable about NXT and Lucha Underground and New Japan and all this other stuff. And I was like, well, let's take it a step further. Like, let's do all of that. Like, let's just call it like the best of the rest. Like, let's take all the best of everything else that isn't necessarily mainstream per se. Well, that wouldn't be New Japan. It's pretty mainstream, but you know what I'm saying? Like everything that's not main roster WWE, and let's talk about it because a lot of people want to talk about that. And I jumped at that opportunity. I was like, heck yeah, let's do that. Because I feel like there's a lot of podcasts out there that will talk about Raw, talk about SmackDown, talk about NXT, talk about New Japan and things. But there's not many podcasts out there that will focus on the best of what else is out there. Because we're at a period right now, Brad, you know this more than anybody, wrestling's booming again, man. If it's not already boomed to the max, like with All In and with the Super Show selling out Madison Square Garden, wrestling is
SmackDown now $1 billion television show.
Yes, it's becoming gigantic again, and there's so much out there now. Instead of for the longest time, WWE was king and still is king, but there's Ring of Honor, there's Reality of Wrestling, there's Bar Wrestling, MLW. There's Pro Wrestling 2.0 out of Orlando. There's just so many things going on. Wrestle Circus, which is down, I think, in Austin, Texas. I've watched a couple of their shows. They're great. Impact Wrestling, like these other companies that people aren't necessarily covering that I think not only have athletes and wrestlers that we need to look at, but matches we need to look at and another interesting conversation, like interview wrestlers on the come up. Like, let's get to know Taya Valkyrie. Let's get to know Shane Strickland. Like, who are these people? When can I see them? Matt Riddle is another guy that just got signed to NXT who's huge. Like, let's learn about these people and what they're doing. And that's what I want to do. That's, the main job of a broadcaster, Brad, you know this as well, is to put people over. That's the whole point of a wrestling broadcaster, is to put the talent over. And that's what I want to do. Like, I'm not in it for myself. Like, I don't care. I don't care if I get any notoriety. I want to talk to people in the business about why they love it, because that fuels me. When you talk about something that you love with somebody, you get an energy from it. And I like it when I go to like I go to the store or something and I see somebody with like a New Day shirt on, because I'm like, that's one of my tribe. Like, we're in the same group, man.
Right.
Like, you like the New Day? Hey, man, I'm wearing a Sami Zayn shirt. Like, we're in the same tribe. Like, we get each other. That's what I like about that kind of conversation. I feel like with the restrictions they put on talent for the main roster stuff, it's going to be a rare opportunity to get, somebody like Roman Reigns on your show. But I could reach out through people and maybe get a John Hennigan who's tearing it up right now, or Sammy Callahan, or, you name it. You name it. I could get people and I want to talk to them. That's why Best of the Rest, I wanted it to be different. It's going to be different. And that's my real passion project right now. I just want to get that off the ground. We're working really hard to get it done. And Ryan has given me, speaking of giving opportunities, Ryan Satin has given me quite an opportunity to do that on a big platform such as Pro Wrestling Sheet. To just go ahead and jump in is pretty crazy in itself, and not a place I thought I would be 2 months ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's an established entity. It's a big deal. Yeah. So it's nice to be able to. So what's the status? When will we be getting the Best of the Rest show?
Well, we're kind of tooling with different things right now. The thing is, I don't live in LA. That's
right,
where
nor do I.
Pro Wrestling Sheets. Yeah, that's where Pro Wrestling Sheets based out of. That's where Ryan is based out of. So it kind of, with a new podcast studio, trying to get connections up when you're not in the actual studio is a little bit difficult. So hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we're going to be banging it out. So look for that in the future. It's going to be something special. It's going to be something completely different. So if you're one of those people that are always like, man, I love New Japan. I love talking about Kenny Omega. I love talking about Cody, man. I love All In. I'm so ready for that. Kota Ibushi. I want to talk about these people, or I want to hear about them. You're going to hear about it on there. You want to talk about Kenny King and Ring of Honor? We're going to talk about it on there. It's something different. It's something that you've wanted and that you're not going to get many places. So come listen to us talk about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that there needs to be a place for that. There needs to be a show for that specific purpose, and I think that's what podcasting has really gotten to, because everyone has a podcast now, and it's what makes yours different from the other ones. And I think that that's an awesome pathway that not many people have tried, if anybody. I mean, I don't know if anyone's tried. That's why Bruce, I remember I was there when Bruce started his podcast. And I remember really when he came and did my old show, Your Opinion Doesn't Matter, I remember telling him, you need to do a podcast. Your stories are so great. And he found a format that no one else did. He had all this information that no one else had, and that's why he's successful. And I think that the same thing with Best of the Rest. No one really does this kind of show. That's why I think it has legs and it can be successful. And it's Collider Pro Wrestling Sheet, so obviously it's got a good base here. Now, before Aaron, we wrap this whole shindig up, because I think we could go for 2 hours. We could probably go for 3 hours. We're almost at the hour mark right now. So I don't want to give away, because I'm sure you're going to be back on the show in the coming months, or if not weeks. But I wanted to talk to you about something that we got into a little bit of a heated conversation about over Twitter. We have opposing views, and I know I'm actually probably the minority opinion on this, because I know John Roca doesn't share this opinion, and many people do not who are pro wrestling fans on my timeline. But I did a podcast on the Brad Gilmore Show where I talked about giving the Bella Twins their respect in the industry, in the WWE. You seem to be on the opposing side of that. I think that they've done a lot for the women's evolution. You're sort of not all the way there. I think I had you with some good points, but let's talk about it. Where do you sit on the Bella Twins? You did
hit me with some good points. That's why I went and reflected upon what I had said and their contributions to what I feel like they've contributed to this women's evolution. I think it comes down to this, Brad. I think when I look at the Bella Twins, I see the butterfly belt.
Right.
And I see old guard women's wrestling. And I know that Nikki held that belt for a long time, and Charlotte was the last person to hold it, and Paige and AJ Lee and Caitlyn, and like these people that are by good workers. I never questioned the work rate of Nikki or Brie, because Nikki broke her neck and how many times in that ring. I mean, anybody that goes out there and puts their effort in, I'm never going to knock them for that. I think it just comes down to, that's what I see, butterfly belt. That's what I see. But I'm also not in tune with the Total Bellas. I'm not in tune with Total Divas. I know it's a thing. I know people love it. I've been to wrestling shows with friends and friends' girlfriends who, when Natalia came out, they about lost their mind because they didn't realize this was the company that she worked for. Yeah. And they were losing their mind because they're Total Divas fans. Like, it was crazy. And I get that side of it. But I think, and it's hard to say, like, I look at things as I do because I'm male, but everything is through a male gaze for me. I'm an I look at a match. I think the women's evolution in WWE began for me with Emma versus Paige at the first takeover. Like, that was the first time I was like, whoa, like this is going to be big. And, Ronda Rousey was already popping off at that time. Ronda was big. And it's just like, man, like I don't want to say like I'm a person that's like, oh, women can't wrestle. They're just this or that. I never thought that way, but to put it on a main stage and put it in front of my face to where, look at this, it's like, okay, all right, you've got my attention. Now give me more. And ever since then, it's like the Bella Twins were just on the outside of that, in my opinion. So it's like you go on to Charlotte, Becky, Bayley, and now you've got Ember Moon and Nikki Cross and the Riot Squad and all these people. And it's like the Bellas are still on the outside. And I feel like, in kind of a way, and people may agree with this or not, I feel like a little bit they're coming on the back end, per se, and trying to cash in a little bit on that evolution. That's kind of how I feel about it.
Well, and I can see how that's, your point. And I'm not saying that you're an idiot and it comes from upbringing, but I'm saying I think that there was so, it's like the perfect storm. There's so many things that happen right around the same time that it all led to it. And I think the Bella Twins were a part. The success of the Total Bellas, Total Divas franchises, as far as bringing in new female fans of all ages, I think that's a factor. I think the rise of athleticism and technical ability and skill inside the ring, longer matches, more competitive matches from the women, that greatly added to it. And I also think Ronda Rousey, from an MMA standpoint, and a women's athlete, her and Serena Williams, they added to it. And I also think, where we were as a country, I think it all added to it, and it all was the perfect storm at the same exact time that they all benefited from each other, and they all made each other grow. And I think that the Bella Twins were are obviously, if you say Total Divas, Total Bellas, they're the first people you think of. I mean, when you say Total Divas, you think of Nikki Bella and Brie Bella. And they built this empire, and they have an outside celebrity, which have made, in my opinion, so many people, mainly a female audience, admittedly, but so many new fans have come to it. And when those new fans come and see it, and they see the Riot Squad, or they see the Iconics, or they see Sasha and Bayley and Charlotte and Becky and this one and that one, then they're like, oh, okay, I'm in. And I'm in. And I think that the Bellas bringing notoriety, bringing their fame and notoriety, from their reality show into WWE, right? Even though the reality show is about them being in WWE, they became famous more so, in my opinion, outside of WWE, and now they bring that fame back in. I think it just elevates the division, just like I think Ronda Rousey being champion now elevates the division. But I really think it's in the eye of the beholder. I just don't like people who don't give them any credit and say they don't have any in-ring skill and they've benefited nothing to the wrestling business from an in-ring wrestling standpoint. I don't agree with that either. I think Nikki Bella is actually a pretty solid worker, and I've had really Hall of Fame, I won't drop any hints, but Hall of Fame level talent tell me she's a damn good worker. So I'm going to take
Dallas
that.
Page?
Maybe Diamond Dallas Page. You'll never know. But I've had them tell me how great of an in-ring worker she is, and I've been in the wrestling business for 6 years. I can see it as well, and that's why I think that they get a bad rap. Speaking of the aforementioned Paul Wolf, who I don't even know this jabron anymore either. I don't even know who the hell Paul Wolf is, but he did blow me up on Twitter, and I found something that he said really insulting. And I don't mean to blow his spot up, but go find him on Twitter and send him hate tweets. But he said the only reason Nikki Bella ever got where she was essentially was because she dated John Cena and she had large breasts. And I'm like, well, you're insulting, and that's kind of a sexist, male chauvinistic pig thing of you to say. So that's my shot. I'm sending shots everywhere, even to you, Paul Wolf. I don't even know who you are, but you're getting all the shots.
Well, a lot of women have large breasts and don't get. So that's so weird. But anyway.
Charlotte, what was she just out for? And I don't care. I don't care if you have any additions or modifications to your body. That's your body. You're allowed to do with it what you want. That you can get a tattoo, you can get a piercing, you can get a tummy tuck, you can get ass injections, you can get whatever you want. I don't care. I don't think that has anything to do with your push or not. This isn't 1997.
Can we address something else that I saw in your Twitter debates that I was like, we had the thing about the Bellas, which is whatever, but
right.
I saw something on yours where these people were coming at you, and I was like, dude, like these people are so wrong and don't even realize it.
Which one's this?
When you're talking about Ronda, I think you said it when you said Ronda Rousey. If there wasn't Ronda Rousey, there would be no this or that women's. I don't know if that's what you said. I might be paraphrasing.
Yeah, but essentially, yeah.
I think you're 100% dead on. 100%. Like if there was no Ronda Rousey to change the status quo of combat sports, you're not getting no women's evolution. It's not happening.
Absolutely.
Because she goes to Dana White, a guy that runs the UFC, that said women's MMA, gross, not my thing.
Never will happen.
Never going to happen. And then Ronda Rousey comes in, changes that immediately. And everybody wanted. I met Ronda Rousey once. True story. And she set the world on fire, man. There was nowhere you could go where there wasn't a picture of her. Somebody was talking about her. She brought notoriety to that combat side. Serena Williams has always been there. I think this might be a hot take. I don't know if it should be, but I think Serena Williams is the best professional athlete of all time. Like I really,
that's a
truly
spicy take right there, Aaron Turner.
I really think that she's got to be in the conversation at least. She's got to be in the top 5.
I'll put her in the conversation. I'll put her in the conversation.
She's got to be in the conversation, man. But like, just her accomplishments in Grand Slams and how long she's been able to be on top, like it's unbelievable. Like to look at that, but it's asinine to think that Ronda Rousey hasn't earned it. Like hasn't earned her spot. Like, are you out of your mind? Like, she got punched in the face for a living.
Oh, it's crazy.
She's an Olympic judokan. Like, she's no joke. Like, I don't understand why. Oh, well, she got the title off Alexa Bliss. Well, yeah. Like in a real fight, who would win? Like you got this punk Alexa Bliss, and you got this monster in Ronda Rousey. Of course, she's gonna win. And I don't get it. Like, I don't understand that part of it. I think Ronda has really been a shot of legitimacy, and let's not forget that Ronda's career after those 2 UFC losses was not great. She was not in a good place, not at all. And now she's smiling. She's saying, I'm going to carry this division on my back. Like, I feel like it's reinvigorated her as a person and an athlete. And I think that's awesome to see.
Yeah, I think I hear that motorcycle in the background too.
There you go.
There it goes. It comes full circle. I agree with you 100%. I did the podcast about why I think Ronda Rousey's best for business, and I think anybody. I try to be respectful of other people's opinions, but they're all stupid.
They are. I mean, truly, in this instance, yes.
Yeah, they're just dumb opinions.
You're ignoring facts at this point,
right? I mean. I talked to, once again, somebody who is very well knowledgeable about the wrestling business, and they said if they were a promoter and they had Ronda Rousey, they would do the exact same thing. She's going to draw so many eyeballs to the company. And here's a great debate. I threw this out on my podcast. I'm going to do it on Twitter because it's going to just annoy so many of the Ronda Rousey haters. Go outside anywhere. Go in your job. If you work on the third floor, go to the seventh floor. Go to the local convenience store. Go to the library. Go to a gas station. Go to a high school. Go wherever you want. Find 10 random people. Ask them. Ask out of the 10. Ask them if they know who AJ Styles is. Just ask them. See how many people say, yeah, he's the WWE champion. I'm just being serious.
Sure.
I don't know. Less than 5 for sure.
Probably.
And I think if anything around that number, that's a really great group of people, and maybe it's in like Atlanta or
it's probably
Orlando.
around here.
Yeah. Yeah. And now go ask those same 10 people if they know who Ronda Rousey is. If it's not 9 out of 10, it's 10 out of 10.
Yeah, you're right.
And that's the reality of wrestling. Aaron Turner, you are a pleasure to speak with. As always, I appreciate you for being honest on the show. I appreciate you for coming on the show. You know, I didn't think I could get Aaron Turner. I didn't think I could land you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Big time. Big time. You get Maya, you get Phil Hellmuth, and it's like Aaron Turner's the one that big time me.
Yeah. No, this is what people don't know who are listening. Aaron would, he ducked my calls. He wouldn't respond to DMs. He just blew my timeline up about the Bellas, but he won't accept the invite. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, of course.
Brad Gilmore, real talk, is the king of you send him a text and he's on Twitter 2 seconds later, but doesn't respond to your text.
Do I do that? I don't like that.
Yeah, you do that.
I do that. Well, you know what it is? I think sometimes I see a thing, I am bad at texting, and I will explain it. I see text messages, and then I end up doing something, or I get them while I'm doing something, and I completely forget about them until like hours later, if not days later. But I always respond.
You do.
But I just might not do it immediately. But I will work on that habit. Thank you for pointing it out to me. Now I look like a bad person when I was trying to put the heat on you. Don't put the heat on the host. You put the heat on the guest. Anyway, Aaron Turner, anything else you want to plug before I get you out of here?
Just be on the lookout for Best of the Rest when it drops. You can catch my coverage of the Mae Young Classic 2 on ProWrestlingSheet.com. It's over there. It has all the results. So if you don't want to know what happened, probably don't visit it. But check that out, and more from me in the future, pro wrestling wise, brother. I hope so, and maybe, just maybe, you might see me on Schmoedown Rundown 100. Maybe we'll see.
I don't know. If I were a betting man, I would not put money on it. But you never know what can happen in this crazy space that we inhabit. What do you think, real quick?
Your producer thinks otherwise.
Yeah, 15 seconds or under. What do you think of the new champion?
New champion of what?
Schmoedown.
Oh, it's the greatest thing that's ever happened.
Okay.
I love Bibbs. I think he's fantastic.
Well, we'll talk about it more maybe if somehow you manage to get an invite on the 100th show. But that's Aaron Turner, everybody. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you. And I will continue to listen to you on the Brad Gilmore Show and Heated Conversations. Schmoedown Rundown, brother.
Yes, brother. That's Aaron Turner, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, Brad, what have you done now?